Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 112.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Well, I'm happy in this episode. We had a chance to interview Robert Boardman. Robert Boardman's famous for hub holsters and 3D printing, as well as being a Tech Field Day delegate, etc. So we had a chance to talk to him about 3D printing and how that might enhance your life as a wireless LAN professional. Had a Wi-Fi For Beginners blog post interview by Cate, and then a chance that I had to talk with Blake Krone about coding, not just coding, scripting, how those skills will help wireless LAN professionals in the future, how he got started and how you might want to get started too. Enjoy this episode.
Main session.
Where are you today?
Today I am in lovely Monterey in the conference room at the college where I work.
Do you have a nice view?
Currently, no. Right now I'm looking at a whiteboard, but if I do go outside, I do get to see the ocean every day.
Very nice. That's very helpful. Well, I thought it'd be fun to let the podcast listeners know about 3D printing. You have become the 3D printer man. It looks like you have a full-on business running on top of doing Wi-Fi. And so can you back up in history? Oh, yeah. Oh. That is true, yeah. Can you back up in history and tell us, how did it all get started?
So it kind of got started as a good friend of mine who was a tech over in the graphic arts department of our college. And he gives me a call one day and he's like, hey, you got to come take a look at this. You got to check it out. And one of our sculpture teacher had actually got his first 3D printer. And he wanted to start an actual 3D printing curriculum. And so of course, the reason they called me over was actually to get IT stuff. But, and it just kind of took off from there as we spent an entire summer just finding files and printing them and kind of learning what works and doesn't work and fixing printers. And I had ended up buying my own. And right about the end of the summer, I'd just gotten a MacBook. I was a Windows guy before, and I was just like, I'm tired of Windows. Let's try Mac. And so I'm getting ready to do surveys, and I was like, this Mac is pretty. I don't know that I want to put Velcro on it. And I'm walking back from the 3D printing lab, and it's like, hey, why don't I just make something to hold the thing? And then I don't have to put Velcro on it ever again. And it just kind of took off from there.
Well, I got to say, that was a brilliant move. The rest of us you're not the first to have that exact experience with a Mac. You look at it, it's all pretty, you don't want to touch it. So we get cases. You put a case on, then you put the Velcro on the case. And instead, you went outside the box and made a different solution. So your solution is called Hub Holster. Where'd the name come from? I mean, obviously, the hub comes from a USB hub.
Actually, the name came from a bunch of us were sitting on Slack. I think it's Steve McKim. Actually, I think came up with the final name. We were throwing names back and forth. It's like Hub Holder. It was just, I knew I wanted hub, and we were just throwing words around with hubs one day. And I think Steve gets credit for the actual final hub holster. And then it made the graphic for the logo so much easier because it's a hub and a holster. It was an easy graphic at that point in time. Yeah.
Works very well. So how many iterations? I remember actually it was just last summer when you had a CWAP class here at the Wireless LAN Pros Academy here in Utah, and you shipped off a box of all sorts of different sizes. So how long did it take to go from your first concept to, I guess, how many iterations before you got one that you liked?
So it started off really, really basic. It was actually just literally a bunch of 90-degree angles and the laptop clip to hold the hub. I probably went through 4 or 5 iterations before I actually got a shape that I liked. Then another 2 or 3 iterations trying to figure out some way to get rid of the 90-degree angles gracefully. Is just putting kind of a curve in it is nice, but there's thickness, there's all kinds of other things, and actually making it printable is another thing. Then I wanted to test it with different hubs, so I got in touch with Roel, who's up at just 45 minutes north of me, so it makes getting things to him much easier. And he brought me the Belkin, which, by the way, is the nice hub, but it is the worst hub to design things for because curves are not fun. Trying to get that
curves
on
both sides, even.
Yeah, it's got that egg shape, and then it has a nice flat piece at the top that runs right down the top of it. So it's not even a full egg shape. It's like an egg shape that somebody cut a little slant down the top of it. So that was a challenge because that was back when I was just first getting into designing, and so trying to design shapes to exact tolerances was very interesting. It was a great learning experience.
How critical is the lid of your computer's thickness to making these fit properly?
It's actually, so the thickness of it is not so much important as it is making sure that the clip itself is tight enough to sit on the lid. Because if you're walking around, it's like, let's take, for instance, a Surface Pro 4. That's probably about the thickest hub holster I've designed was for that SP4. And then you put that on, say, a brand new MacBook. It's going to be all over the place. You stick it on there, it's just going to, it'll probably just fall right off because it's 2-3 times the thickness of a MacBook. So
you do need a little
thickness of the
pressure
screen
on
is, yes, about 0.2 of a millimeter tighter than the actual screen. So that way it gets you a little tension.
Okay. So how many different versions do you have available now in your store?
Oh, so that's available in the store. I think I have 3 or 4 different versions of Dell, all versions of Mac going back to about 2000, but silver Macs. Nobody's asked for a white Mac version. Let's hope that doesn't ever happen.
Gratefully.
Yeah. I do Surface Pro 2, 3, and 4, and some Lenovo's. So I've gotten a good selection of laptops, and then hubs. I do a bunch of them. I've done a bunch of one-off custom ones for people, but primarily I kind of follow the trends. I like Ekahau, both of the styles of Ekahau hub that Ekahau gave out. I don't know.
The little square
Ekahau
one.
Yeah, the one with the switch on top. A lot of people still like that one, and then the one that they're sending out. I don't know if they're still currently sending that out. Rosewell is a very popular one. That Rosewell is with RHB-330.
Yeah, the 7
popular because I know the actual model number. Yes, the 7-port one. That's a fan favorite. Then the original Unitech that I had before I found out that it produced a ton of noise, and so I don't do that anymore. The Belkin still gets a lot. Hutu and Orco, which ironically use the exact same body for all of their hubs. So if you buy a USB 2.0 Hutu and a USB 2.0 Orco, they're generally the exact same hub, just a different brand name on them. And then I'm moving into the Anchor because it seems, I think Air Magnet shipping that 7-port Anchor, which is really nice because Anchor uses that aluminum body. So they're 7-port and they're 4-port. USB 2, USB 3, USB-C,
USB-C,
which I just got in. The USB-C one actually is the exact same size and dimensions as the USB 2 one and the USB 3 one. So that was really nice.
You are now not only an expert in 3D printing, but an expert in USB hubs.
Yes, I can tell you a few things about hubs. Especially when I was initially going to, since I still have a box of hubs that you sent me that I use on a regular. In fact, I've had a couple of people that have been like, hey, I have this hub, can you? And I dig through it and it's like, well, Keith sent me one, so I can make you something.
Please do not return those.
I know. I was like, come on, he's going to ask for them back because eventually somebody's going to say, hey, can you do this? And I'm going to be like, I've never seen that hub before. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's good. Well, let's move on past hubs to cooler things. At the WLPC in Phoenix, we had Odroids, and you did a phenomenal job of building a custom case for those. Now, what reminded me of that is we I've just been putting together a bunch for the Bogota WLPC, and I ordered from you a bunch of those Odroid cases. They have a lot of engineering in them. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. It took a little bit of time. You guys presented a very interesting dilemma when you asked for that.
I mean, because we're to get them past customs to get into Colombia, we know we're getting hit by customs. So we were taking batteries out, loading them in so they were preloaded. And I was amazed at the tolerances. We drop a battery in there, it just fits snug without any issues at all. The little, I don't know, you call them the brass ferrules? Is that what's the official word for the?
Yeah, the little. Are you talking about the threaded inserts?
Yeah. Does that have a real name?
Yeah, they're a threaded insert.
Oh, okay. I had called something like that a female screw hole once, and some people they like laughed at me for saying that, but it made sense. It's got a female screw and it's a hole.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, just don't say that in mixed company. I don't think.
No, I don't. That might not be okay.
Those were great technology, and then just to bring it up because I've got to talk about it is your minifig that you took to Cisco Live. How long did that take?
All right, he took 330 hours in various parts, which he might be gracing WLPC next year. There's conversations.
We would love to have that. But before you did that, at WLPC, you brought a handmade, well, not handmade, obviously 3D printed tower. I don't know. I mean, it was a tripod. It slid, it changed, it did everything you need you'd need for a AP on a stick survey. Now, what was your impetus and what made you think, I should make one of these out of 3D printing?
Well, I got to a point where I think it's a problem that a lot of us have with AP on a stick is 9 times out of 10, it's bought from stuff you found at Home Depot 5 hours before you had to run an AP on a stick survey. That's generally what happened. Yeah, you're like, because nobody wants to ship a Pelican case, because that's $200-$300 to ship all of that gear. Now you have to add that on top, and it's just it's easier to, like, a lot of people, like, I just go grab a painter's pole for $10 at Home Depot and leave it there when I walk away.
I know guys who take it back to Home Depot and get a refund.
Oh,
not that I would suggest that, but I've heard others talk about that.
I didn't think about that, but thank them, because I'm not saying I'll use that, but it's an interesting idea. So what I wanted was something, one, that would look good, look professional, and two, kind of be a modular in a sense that if I needed something a little different, I could configure it without having to start back from scratch. So that was kind of the start of the idea. And then I also wanted it to be mobile. I wanted it to fit in a suitcase. So that was kind of my idea, which I actually did that when we went down to WLPC. I brought it in my suitcase along with all of my other clothes. So it worked, and an AP. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of that.
So you actually, it was really cool to see and play with, I have to admit, but have you used it in real work?
I have. I used it at work. I use it at work often. I have to do some redesigning because after using it, I have found some things that need to be improved, which that's kind of the great part about it being modular is it's like, okay, I'd like to improve this part and this part. I think the biggest weakness of it was the pole. It's like after extended use, and it's just kind of the weight of APs, especially if we're hanging 3802s now, and those things are
they don't weigh very much at all.
No, I think they're only about 7 pounds a piece. So basically I need to go back, and I might even use the idea of the painter's pole just because of the fact that, okay, I've got the tripod, I've got the mount, and I've got what I have holding my battery. I just need the pole. And
you can get a painter's pole everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of that. And I have a couple of really neat ideas that I'd like to try, but they're really expensive, and I'm not 100% sure that my accountant will allow me to start playing with that.
Oh, she doesn't.
I have some interlocking ideas. Yeah. There's a limit. It's like if it can't be funded through what I make with Hub Holster, then I'm not allowed to do it, basically. So
you married your CFO.
Exactly, which was a smart idea. My CFO makes sure that I'm not on the street with a bunch of 3D printers.
That's a good place to be.
What's
next? You've done some really out there things with 3D printing. I don't want you to, pre-announce before, just what kind of things might we be looking forward to in the future?
Well, I hear that there's something really cool coming for AP on a stick, and I might be designing something similar to what I've already designed for it, if that is cryptic enough.
That's very cryptic enough, and we'll just leave it right there.
It's just another carrying case, basically. That's in the loop, and then I've been wanting to get a lot into. And I blame Ryan for this and Jake and these guys. It's just like I'm starting to get into the Arduino and stuff. So I'm talking with a couple of them, and we're going to see if we can make minifig a Segway, because every wireless engineer needs a Segway. So
I totally agree.
Yeah. I'm still working on mine. It's my CFO and my main job boss don't see the value yet, but I'm working. I try every day.
Well, I've had some of my customers who I've used the Segway to do on site buy their own, because they found it's that much more efficient that they actually could save money and buy their own rather than pay me. It was a little sad because I like getting paid, but it's actually a very efficient way to do your work. And the ROI is like less than a week. I mean, how many times can you go to your boss and ask for ROI and say, I can get this paid back in a week?
Yeah, it's like how much time do I spend walking surveys or doing validations? Because that's a lot of what we're doing now is validations, and we're about to start doing our parking lot. And I'm like, you really want me to spend 3 weeks walking a parking lot? So
being at EDU, don't you have minions to help you?
I work at a small ed, so I don't have minions.
Oh, you don't get minions, though.
I don't get minions.
I thought that's what graduate students were called.
It's an interesting dynamic here. It's political issues, you could say.
Well, that layer 8 stuff will get you every time.
Every time. That's what stops. Isn't that what stops great design? Is layer 8?
All the time. Yes. So I have another kind of a segue question, and not about segues. Segue is in changing the topic. I've overheard some people who aren't really involved in Twitter or social media say things, and I'm just going to put a blanket statement and I'll let you react to it. Social media friends aren't real friends. They're like virtual friends.
I would disagree, just because of the fact I have had, social media has changed my life as far as friendship wise. I have met a lot of people that follow me on Twitter, and we call social media friends personally now. But before then, you guys on social media have helped me. You guys helped me find CWNP. You helped me to, find products. I've had social media friends help me through problems at work that I would have had to spend thousands of dollars calling in a consultant to help with. So yeah, no, that's silly. They're not using social media right, I guess.
I think that's the answer. They obviously don't have any social media friends if they believe that.
That's true. You're right. They might follow a lot of people on social media, but I guess there's not any real interaction. But
so how did you go from just being a Twitter user to being the point where you could say, oh no, I actually do have a lot of friends?
So I used to only use Twitter as I wouldn't say a big conference goer, but I used to do Comic-Con and Cisco Live. Like, I've been going to Cisco Live for years. I used to use it as the freebie thing. It's like, all right, retweet our thing or like us or whatever, and we'll give you a tchotchke. I'm like, yeah, that's a cool tchotchke. I'm down. That's really what I did with it. I'm not a huge social media person, but what changed was I had just finished my CCNA wireless. It was 2 years ago, and I was like, all right, let's go buy the books for CCNP. And CCNP wireless is a really difficult course in the sense because there's not a lot of training material compared to a lot of the other tracks. And so I was like, all right, go to Google. That's your next best friend. And I came across your podcast and Roel's podcast. And it was the episode where you did with Roel, where you said, get on Twitter, start a blog. So I went back to Twitter, cleared out all the crazy stuff I had followed, and started following you guys. and it just took off from there. And then actually started interacting and being a part. So yeah, the blogging, I love blogging. Writing it's something I have to do more often because it's not one of my strengths, and I just have to sit down and force myself to do it.
Well, for just in 2 years, you've come a long way.
Thank you. Well, actually, no. Yeah, definitely. Thank you and the community, because without you guys, I wouldn't have come anywhere. So,
well, what would you say to someone who said, well, maybe that worked for you, but it's not going to work for me?
I would say take a look and try again, because when you say it doesn't work for me, it's social media is a two-way street. You can't expect people to just go, oh, you're a fabulous person. Doesn't matter if you're the greatest person in the world. If nobody knows it, no one's going to interact. So you have to interact. It's a two-way street. That's the best advice I can give anybody in social media is get out there and talk. I mean, you're going to be wrong. You're going to probably get into a nice Twitter argument. Those are the best, but that's where you learn. That's when you see the people that you want to be around. And I mean, I love a good Twitter argument, not to argue, but because you see people's point of view and you see what people are passionate about. And you find people that have similar passions and you find different views. It just opens you up. So, I mean, it's a two-way street. It's the best way I could say it. What is the old saying? You get what you put into it. Is that the?
That's a nice short way to do it. I just say engage. Get in the arena and engage. Exactly.
It's like at WLPC. That was the largest crowd I ever presented in front of. Just fine. You know what I mean? Unless you try, nothing's ever going to happen.
Oh, wait. That also reminded me. I forgot about Schmitty. You also made the little skeleton Schmitty. Man. Oh. Yeah, you do have all sorts of fun little projects for us.
Yeah, I had all of my popular creations had a nice little reunion at Cisco Live. So the mini switch made it to that thing is taken off on its own. Peter Jones has ran that thing crazily.
All over the world, actually.
Yeah, it's been all over the world where now Peter Jones and I now sign Cisco-made copies of it and give them away. It's been fun, though. And it's the thing. It's a community thing. I do it for the community because, you know what I mean? 3D printing is fun and making statues and coming up with crazy stuff is cool. But if you can't share it with anybody, it's just a bunch of plastic on a wall.
Well, it's cool plastic on a wall, but we all appreciate you sharing it with us. Well, Robert, thanks for your time today. It was good learning a little bit about the how Hub Holster came about and 3D printing. We might have another talk sometime in the future to talk about how to get into 3D printing. I've wanted to, but that's a whole other episode by itself.
I would love to. Anytime, anywhere.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
Wireless LAN blog reviews
with Glenn Cate.
A closer look at some of our favorite Wi-Fi blogs and their authors.
Glenn, Cate, welcome to the show. What Wi-Fi blog review do you have for us this time?
Oh, hey, Matthew, thanks so much. This review we have this week has the word beginner in the name of the website, but it is not for beginners alone. We want to look at WiFi For Beginners.com. Nigel Bowden is the author of this site, and he's a Wi-Fi engineering consultant in the UK, or as we say, across the pond. My British accent isn't too good. Yeah, we often say that in the US. But Nigel is CWNE number 135, and he's got another website as well, wifinigel.blogspot.com. But we're going to be looking at his Wi-Fi for Beginners this time. By the way, Wi-Fi's Twitter handle is @WiFiNigel. So I'm sure you want to follow him on Twitter as well. Nigel has just done a masterpiece of presenting the basics of WLAN engineering in his podcast. This is just great stuff. From the modules entitled What is Wi-Fi to RF Basics, to access points, to Wi-Fi channels, and wireless control and management. Nigel has just presented a great instructional material for anyone learning Wi-Fi. But, you may be a multi-year Wi-Fi veteran, but you will still enjoy checking out Nigel's Wi-Fi for Beginners to maybe boost in some of those areas you're not as strong at. He has 6 modules. Each module has 3 or 4 episodes and about 30 minutes each. And he also has a slide deck for each of the modules, so you can follow along that way as well. Nigel's site has some tabs at the top that gives you some WLAN certification information, other useful websites, a contact tab where you could subscribe to his mailing list. I definitely do that. And it's just a great website to check out.
Thank you. Anything else we don't want to miss on the site?
Okay, well, that is a good point there, Matthew. And on his tabs, he has a section called quizzes. It's one thing to write and present material on a website. It's not so easy to do the quiz material because you have to think about, how am I going to test someone on the material I just presented? But he's done this. He has a short 15 or so question quiz on each of the modules, and you can review the information you just grasped. So that's a neat thing. Another real quick topic is that Nigel's teamed up with Cucumber Tony, and they do a one-day Wi-Fi training session in the UK. So if you're located in the UK or someplace over in Europe, you might want to check that out. Oh, by the way, if you're not familiar with Cucumber Tony, that's another neat website. I'm going to get the website overload here, but it does third-party cloud management software for access points, and it's a great site. So just kudos to Nigel Bowden for creating Wi-Fi for Beginners. It's a great website for beginners and veterans alike in Wi-Fi. So I just encourage you to be sure to bookmark it, get your colleagues to check that out, and you'll be glad you checked out Wi-Fi for Beginners.
Thank you, Glenn Cate, and we can follow you on Twitter at grcate. Until next time.
Hey, this is Glenn Cate, reminding all of you WLAN professionals out there to keep on blogging in the free world. Bye for now.
WLAN Interview.
Blake Krone, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Great. No issues today. I thought it would be good to talk to you today a little bit about coding, the programming kind of thing. I know you've got skills there, and wondering, the first question I want to pose to you is about, do you think that all wireless LAN pros, people who work with Wi-Fi day in and day out, need to have coding skills?
Well, that's a good question. I think, the coding and the programming and where we're going in networking, it really does feel like everybody should have at least the base minimum of understanding how you could create even just a script, for example, because there's a lot of differences when we talk coding and programming. There's creating a script to make your life easier or do repetitive tasks, and then there's programming an application. And I think a lot of people get hung up when they see the phrase coding and networking in the same sentence. They get worried because they think, do I need to learn how to develop a full application that has libraries and is hooking into all these different systems? And that's not really
compiling and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the case. I look at what I do for what I would consider coding a lot inside of the wireless industry, and most of the stuff that I'm doing, it's scripting. It's doing something that would normally be a repetitive task and coming up with a script that can do it for me. And that's a simplified way to get started, because you pick a language. Python is the big one right now because so much of software-defined networking is leveraging Python. So a lot of people are starting with that. But you take that, you look at it, and you start figuring out some examples of what you want to do. For example, maybe you want to work with a spreadsheet of data, and you want to create something out of that spreadsheet of data, or you have one version of a spreadsheet that you want to manipulate that data and change it to create a CSV that you could import into Prime infrastructure or Airwave or something with a bunch of AP names that correlate to the MAC addresses. So the first thing you would do, grab some Python sample code of how to open up a file. How do you read an existing file? How do you parse through that? And then you can worry about manipulating the data later. Just learn how to read it and then write it back out to a CSV, and you've created a script. And it is fairly straightforward and easy to do. So I think that when you talk to people that are in our industry, there's differences in the levels of programming. You don't have to be somebody like Adrian that's going out there and developing an insanely awesome set of Wi-Fi applications and is this feature robust application that you either sell or give away and then you install on your machine. Start at the very basic level of scripting and figure out, how can I do something that is going to make a repetitive task that I do easier, or how do I solve something? You know, a great solution that I did from just a scripting standpoint was I was surveying a very large ship in the Mediterranean, and I forgot to enable the AP name broadcasting on the Aruba APs. That makes it so Ekahau can't correlate all the BSSIDs together and group all the BSSIDs under one AP object. So the first thing that I did is I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go back and enable this and then resurvey all of my APs. What I ended up doing is I went and took the show tech out of the Aruba controller that has the BSSIDs and the AP names, and I created a script that would modify the Ekahau XML file to be able to group them all together for me so that I didn't have to go back and redo things. I could have manually gone through and combined radios and done that, but that's time consuming when you're talking close to 1,000 access points. Writing the script took me a couple of hours, but once it was executed, it was done in a matter of a couple of minutes, and now I have my file solved. And that was just a simple scripting solution. It's not developing an application.
Well, I've got an example for you, and it ties right into your scripting as repeatability. I used to go and use a barcode scanner, and I'd scan in all the AP's MAC addresses and preload an Excel file with those, and then assign that AP names and locations and give it to the installers. And then since it was an Excel file, I could always output it into, a CSV. I would take it over to Microsoft Word and do a search and replace and use Word for my coding language. Okay, I admit it's really bad. But it worked. It was it allowed you to take in, hundreds of pieces of information, organize them, structure them, and output it back into a CSV that you could then work with. But the problem with that is every time I had to do it, it was a manual process, and there's no scripting language that would allow that to be repeatable. What you're talking about here is an ability, once you figure out the steps, you can then repeat it over and over.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point, is finding something and figuring out a way that allows you to repeat it time and time after again, because I know for a fact I'm going to go and do another survey of an Aruba environment that I'm going to forget to enable the name broadcast, and I'm going to have this again. Or I know for a fact that I'm going to go and I'm going to find an environment where the updated MAC addresses are not present in Ekahau for a new shipping access point, for example, and I'm going to have to do this. So I've spent the time up front to create that script, which I might have to, manipulate down the road to do another, solve another problem, but at least I have the framework. And I think that's what is important, is just getting yourself started on something, because you keep building off of that time and time again. And when you're developing something like just a simple script to be able to do something repetitive for you, or help make your job a little bit easier, you don't have to worry about it being this pretty set of code, because people aren't going to be looking at that. Does it function for you? If it functions for you, great, roll with it, use it. Make sure that you have obviously backups of your data set whenever you're running scripts and things like that, because if you screw it up by having, a case of the Mondays and your decimal points in the wrong spot, you're going to have problems. But work through those different scenarios and come up with it. And scripting is just that. It's creating a script. And like you said, Keith, it doesn't need to be robust. So many people use Excel and I shudder a little bit, but they use macros and they use all the functionality of Excel to do a lot of amazing things. Look at Andrew Van Aj's the Revolution Wi-Fi, the capacity planner. That's an Excel application, for lack of better words. You input the data into Excel, and he's got the scripting, he's got the cell manipulation on the back end that outputs the information for you. As
I doubt he would have it as an application. It would have taken so much longer to actually code it as an app.
Right. Or, another great example, Keith, is your wireless compensation survey. Remember back when you were putting that data set together.
Yeah, I did it in Excel, and you turned it into code on a web page. So thank you.
Yeah, you started with an Excel document, which is where I start a lot of times with things as well, because Excel is an easy way to manipulate data. It doesn't scale, but it's an easy way to manipulate data. So now we've got that idea. You had all the values in there. You had an idea of what you wanted it to look like. Then it's just pulling that out and putting a scripting or a programming language behind it, as opposed to being Excel that's giving you the UI and doing the math.
Well, I like where you're going with this. It's a good topic, and I think everyone should get better at it. Where did you get your skills, and where would you recommend others learn how and get into this?
Oh, Ryan Adsma and Jake Snyder, they're both going to be laughing when they listen to this because I still use it today. But I started way back with Perl and then migrated into PHP, and I started down the computer science path. I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to do computer science. This is great. This is going to be an awesome degree to have. And I actually, oddly enough, I started getting into the Java and C++ and all the other programming languages. I'm like, this really stinks. This is boring. This is not what I want to do with my life. And I actually got out of programming for the most part because I'm like, I don't like this anymore. And I started working at a computer repair center at the University of Minnesota. And to really date it, we had an old system called 4D that was running on our Macs. That was our
fourth dimension, database.
Yeah, exactly. That was our service ticketing and our inventory engine that we used. And
at least it was a step up from FileMaker.
Well, yeah, oddly enough, we were looking at FileMaker too. and we realized we're like, these don't do what we want them to do. So a couple of us took on starting to recreate this thing in Perl and CGI front end, and it was a throwing myself into programming, and I had to try to figure out how to work with all this data, how to build UI elements, how to start developing web applications and learning web front ends and trying to figure out what flows from a user standpoint. So I was thrown into it and trying to figure this all out. And as I started going down my career, then I switched into servers and networking, and I got to the point where I was like, I can leverage all this Perl backend knowledge that I had, but I need something new for it. So at the time I switched to PHP because we didn't have Python yet. And I'm still a holdout. I use what I know because I took the time to just pick something. And that's kind of the thing in programming is you have to pick something. So right now I strongly encourage everybody to pick Python because it's the hot flavor. It's the new thing. And really it's just about, okay, come up with an idea. What do you want to do? I want to iterate through a list of CSV data entries and do something with it. So go to Google. That's the greatest place ever to find out anything about coding because you could just put in Python, importing CSV, creating arrays or something like that, and you're going to get a lot of code samples. And you're going to get everybody's opinions. It's just like the wireless world. Everybody has an opinion on how to do it, and there's 10 different ways to do something. You just need to pick the one that works for you and go off of that. So for me, learning it has always been about finding code snippets on Google, looking through those code snippets, seeing what I can pull out there, seeing how they did their interactions. Okay, how can I manipulate that interaction? Or if it was scripted, what was the inputs for it? Was it a command line input? Okay, if it's a command line input, how do I either change it from a command line input to just looking for a particular file, a particular directory, or how do I change that and pull that out and put a web front end around it to be able to do it? So you start taking all these different building blocks that you find as examples online and start putting them together. There's a lot of great courses as well on a lot of the different video services out there that you can get and start watching as well. But the easiest way that I find is just simply come up with an idea of what do you want to do. The base everybody needs to start with is how do you open and close and how do you read and write files, because that's what you're going to be doing the most of. So you start finding those examples online, start piecing together, start creating sample scripts, and then go from there. If you want to really get into more robust programming and you want to start trying to develop like iOS or Android apps, it's somewhat of a joke right now, but it's getting a little bit better. The Apple Swift Playgrounds is actually really interesting. It's geared more towards getting kids interested in it because it's like playing a game. You have a character and you're trying to move it around and do different things with it. So it's all about helping you understand the iterative process and how to do repetition through loops and things like that. I went through it because I was going to have my daughter start doing it, and it's actually really interesting because it's a good way to get your mindset into thinking about how do I loop through objects. If I want to do this, and for me, when I'm starting to do a script, I'll usually create how to do it for one line item first, and then I wrap the loop statements around it. So the Swift Playgrounds is a great way to help change your mindset from just looking at it as a one-time operation to multiple operations across, 5, 10, 100, 1,000 lines of a CSV file, for example. So really, Google's your best friend with anything on coding. Sure, you can go down to, a Barnes & Noble or bookstore. You can go to Amazon Kindle store, and you could find, hundreds of books on Python programming and introduction to Python programming. I don't tend to learn that way best. I tend to learn best just by looking for an example and then deconstructing that example and figuring out what they did and putting my stuff back into it and figuring out, okay, how do I make this work for me? It's my easy way of learning, how do the structures work and how are you supposed to format your code and things like that.
Well, along those coding repeatability lines, Ekahau has in its ESS software a pre-built report generator. You just click a button, check, and you can get it to do it. Or it has the ability to have, I don't want to call it scripting, but almost a coding language to allow you to make customized reports. How did you go about learning to use that same coding technique, but for Ekahau reports?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. When Ekahau approached and asked me about, what could we do to make reporting better, and we started talking through it, one of the things that I had provided to them was, look, I need a way that I can put a tag inside of a file, and you're going to replace
a tag, kind of like a bag.
Yeah, you guys always make fun of me for my pronunciations. Just keep it up. I'll just keep smiling. So when we were talking about it, I was like, I need some kind of identifier inside of the file that you're going to replace. And then obviously we're going to have to loop through this because you're going to have more than one floor in a file, or you're going to have more than one building possibly in a file. So how do I loop through all these different objects and have you replace them? So it really is a scripting language. It closely resembles a lot of the scripting languages out there and formatting and structure. There's some things that it does differently, but it's a great way to, again, start wrapping your head around the thought process of loops. And when I teach reporting and how to do this in ECSE, the first thing that I always stress for people is you need to start with what the finished product looks like first. So you need to have something that has all of your items in it. If it's got 5 floors on it, put 5 floors in it and have all of your formatting and everything there. And then what you do is you look at it and say, okay, this is showing the floors. So these 5 pages, or these 10 pages, if you have 2, 4, and 5 gig guitar, however you have it broken out, but this section is showing the floors. So the first thing I need to do is I delete all but one of the floor sections, and then I wrap it in a loop start for floors. And I have that ending tag as well on there, and that's that wrapper of that section. Then I go into it and say, okay, what am I trying to show? I'm trying to show this particular visualization. Okay, so in the past, we would go to the wiki, we would figure out what the visualization tag is, and we would replace the image with that. Now we just go up to the menu options and say copy current visualizations tags to the clipboard and paste it. But you start building the components out, and it's just like if you were starting from scratch in a script. You need to start with something first. You have to have an idea. So now that you have the idea, now you start pulling pieces out and replacing it with Ekahau's scripting language, because I really do consider it a scripting language, because you're creating actionable items that the application is going to do something with on a repetitive nature. So you go through and you learn the loop structures, you learn how to create a data tag, you learn how to create a visualization tag, you learn how you can nest the loops underneath each other, you learn about conditional formatting, so I can say, if there's buildings in this, do this. If there's not buildings defined in the file, don't do it. Then you're going to do something different. So there's a lot of options that you can do in there. And it's really, again, it's about taking a final product and start pulling pieces out of it and putting your scripting into it to replace what would have been a manual job. So take those 5 pages of floors out and keep just one floor and wrap it in a loop tag. You've just created a loop that will go through and create a page section or a group section for every floor in your file. So I think Ekahau did a great job with that and allowing us to be able to build not only report templates, but also a way to get data out of Ekahau that we can't otherwise easily. In fact, you
can get some data out that you can't get any other way.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways that we can do this by going into the project file itself. But if you want just a simple CSV list of your AP names and BSSIDs, for example, you can create a simple Word document that just has those identifiers as the comma separated file, one on each line. And yes, it's going to output it into a Word document, but then you copy paste into Notepad and save it as a CSV, and you now have a CSV file. Yeah. So it's a great way to get information out or create barcode labels or just even plain labels. I mean, you can do a lot of fun things with it that are not report related.
Well, and like your Google example, where you started with code snippets, Ekahau has given a whole bunch of report snippets that you can copy and start with somebody else's, code.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to start with samples, or like I said, especially on the report templates, you've got to start with the finished product, because if you start with a clean blank slate on Word and you start adding things, it's not going to turn out well, and you're going to have problems.
Well, I do it kind of the opposite way from you. I start and I make I also have different customers. My customers want unique custom things. So I would make a custom report for a customer, and as I build it, I would come back after it's all finished and highlight what parts do I will not want to do again when they call me back next month. And then say, oh, this is going to repeat. And I did the same thing over and over. And anytime I do something multiple times, oh, I should have put that one into a custom report. So I kind of go the opposite way. I start with real world products because someone's paying me for it. And then to repeat it, build a report after that.
Oh, yeah. And see, because I'll usually start with the framework, and then I add the per customer customizations after the fact, because it's usually their customizations are usually a little bit smaller than the changes that are needed. But no, I mean, that's the thing is, like, you got to figure out how to start somewhere, and then you go from there. And that's I think the Ekahau is a great way to start to at least wrap your head around the concept of conditional statements and loops and having data tags that are going to change from, REQ-SNR or dash strength to, show it, or SIG dash strength, I think it is tag. When you put that in a report, it's going to be replaced with -67 or -65 or whatever value you have inside of your coverage requirements. So I think it's a great way to start to work through that and figure out, how does this logic flow? How does it go? That you could then adapt and take into also understanding Python scripting for more command line repetitive tasks of manipulating CSV files on a larger scale.
Well, and there's some people who have taken just if you go into Mac OS, open a terminal, and do the airport command, there's a ton of features and output that comes out. You can even get it to sit in the middle of a loop, just listening over and over again, and then they take and parse that data and dump it over into a file and then grep it. So the whole grep process and understanding how those expressions, regular expressions, are used is another place someone could start and learn how to manipulate data.
Oh my goodness, yes. Going back to the days of awk and grep and hoy vey.
That's a good place to start, though. Brian Long did an amazing scripting job of taking and parsing out a Wireshark data capture to find out and calculate what the average MCS is, what the average data rate was, what the current retry rates are, just off of any standard Wireshark file. So, and he obviously did it all in Python. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing is that people shouldn't get hung up on creating something that is real-time parsing. It's more about find something that's collecting data that can then export out that data, and then from there, now that I have that data collected somewhere, if it's in a recorded file, then I can go back and I can start worrying about writing a script to get all that data, like you said, like Brian's example of finding the average MCS rates. You don't necessarily care about that real time. You care about that after the fact, because you were looking for something, or you're troubleshooting something, or you're analyzing something. Now, when you're actually doing the data analysis, that's where all these scripts start coming into play. And if you have a data set, you can run 5-10 different scripts against it to pull all the items that you want out of it.
And then work through each of those scripts. If you want to make a master that does the whole thing, break it into parts, have each sub-process give you the one answer you want, then eventually you can build the master script that does it all.
Exactly. And it's all about data collection up front. And that's why I generally tell people to collect way more data than you think that you would need when you're doing surveys and analysis and things like that, because your job when you're there is data collection, not necessarily data analysis. that's where you're going to go back, and you're doing that from the comforts of your office or your hotel room or wherever. And that's where you start to run your scripts and try to figure out if you're trying to create a script that's going to capture all these live events, you're probably going to miss something.
And there's other people who've done that. It's easier to copy. Oh, by the way, have you played with Horst on the WLPC Odroid?
I have. That is fun.
And that I mean, when you just said a live example, what he's doing is parsing live data and showing it in. I think he's using like an N-curses interface to get kind of graphical information. It's kind of a cool way to go about it.
Yeah, and there's lots of people that have already developed those solutions, so you figure out how to use those solutions. Don't ever feel like you can't use somebody else's solution if it's out there. You know, I'm the type of person, I'm like, I will build it if I need to, but I will certainly buy it if it's going to do what I want it to do.
That's a good attitude. Well, Blake, thank you for spending this time today talking a little bit about coding and scripting and how wireless LAN professionals can use it. Any last statements here?
Don't be afraid. It's not scary. You know, it's going to take you a few hours just to get the base understanding of it, but you know, just get out there and start playing around with it. And the best exercise to do is the hello world activity, is to figure out, can you make it print hello world in a file, in a terminal, on a web page, wherever, because that at least shows that you've got the idea of how you can output data from a script.
And on scripting, there's the whole if this then that, just IFTTT type of things, or little code bases you can play together with. Little Bits is another place you can get started if you like to manipulate the real world. A lot of places to go and learn more about coding. So thanks for your time, Blake.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Wireless LAN terminology.
Power save mode. Management of a non-AP STA operates in either active mode or power save mode. A STA in power save mode is either in an awake or doze state. Power save mode conserves battery life while the STA dozes, but complicates frame delivery with additional queuing, frame types, and frame exchange sequences. Vendors have called this power save pull mode or sleep mode. Wireless STAs that are always powered by an AC outlet should never be configured for power save mode.
Yes, we're done. You're almost finished. You can hit stop and pause and go on to the next episode. This was episode 112 of Wireless LAN Professionals podcast. We talked with Robert Boardman about 3D printing, had an interview with Nigel by Cate, as well as talked with Blake Krone about coding, scripting, and how that can help you in your career. Again, any feedback is always wanted, enjoyed. Leave comments in the show notes, send emails, or leave your feedback on iTunes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.